The great hall of the Galactic Concordance trembled with an anticipation that felt almost electric. Delegates from 1,000 different worlds sat in tiered formations, their various physiological responses betraying a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Holographic translation matrices hummed softly, converting every nuanced sound into comprehensible communication. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood alone at the central podium, a solitary human figure dwarfed by the massive chamber's architectural grandeur. Her olive skin and dark hair stood in stark contrast to the shimmering alien environment. Behind her, a dynamic holographic display began to pulse with an intricate tapestry of data, centuries of human history condensed into a living, breathing visual narrative. The Zorn representatives occupied the most prominent position. Their reptilian features were carefully composed, but a subtle tension rippled through their scaled skin. Commander Krelzax, the youngest of their diplomatic corps, found his clawed hand unconsciously tapping against his communication device. Something about this human's presentation felt different, more dangerous than any military posturing they had encountered before. Distinguished members of the Galactic Concordance, Elena began, her voice carefully modulated, neither aggressive nor submissive. We stand at a moment of profound crossroads. The holographic display behind her shifted, showing a complex timeline of human development. From primitive stone tools to quantum computing, from localized conflicts to global cooperation, the progression was anything but linear. It told a story of constant adaptation, of a species that transformed challenges into opportunities. Many of you have viewed humanity as an unpredictable, potentially dangerous species, she continued. Today, I'm here to confirm your suspicions, but perhaps not in the way you expect. A soft murmur ran through the assembled delegates, the Lithian representatives, silicon-based entities known for their hyperlogical approach, leaned forward with particular interest. Their crystalline structures refracted the holographic light, creating a mesmerizing display of colors. Elena's presentation began to unfold a narrative that was simultaneously a warning and an invitation. She demonstrated humanity's unique capacity for systemic thinking, showing how their species approached problems not as isolated challenges, but as interconnected opportunities for transformation. Charts and graphs materialized, showing economic models, technological innovations, and sociological adaptations. Each visualization told a story of resilience. When resources became scarce, humans didn't simply fight. They innovated. When environmental challenges emerged, they redesigned entire systems of living. Commander Krelzax felt an uncomfortable sensation crawling along his neural pathways. This wasn't a typical diplomatic presentation. It was a comprehensive deconstruction of everything the Zorn Imperium believed about strategic engagement. We are not here to threaten, Elena said, her words carefully chosen. We are here to demonstrate a fundamental truth about our species. Humanity's greatest strength is not our technology, our resources, or our individual capabilities. Our greatest strength is our ability to understand, adapt, and fundamentally reimagine potential. The holographic display behind her began to show a series of complex simulations. Ecological restoration projects, quantum communication networks, social restructuring models, each more intricate than the last. It wasn't just data. It was a living demonstration of human potential. Delegates from various species shifted in their seats. The Varix traders, known for their mercantile cunning, began to calculate potential strategic partnerships. The Krell merchants saw economic opportunities where others might see conflict. Elena's final slide appeared, a simple image showing the Earth from space, surrounded by intricate networks of communication, ecological systems, and technological infrastructure. This is our final warning, she said, her voice cutting through the chamber's charged atmosphere. Not a threat of destruction, but an invitation to understanding. The chamber fell silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air like a promise or a prophecy. The Quantum Horizon Research Facility looked unremarkable from the outside. A sleek, low-profile building nestled in the Chilean Atacama Desert. Satellite imagery would show nothing more than a standard research complex. But beneath the surface lay humanity's most ambitious technological project in generations. Dr. Marcus Chen stood before a wall of quantum computational interfaces, his fingers dancing across holographic displays that seemed to breathe with living information. Surrounding him, a team of 30 of the world's most brilliant minds worked in near-silent concentration. Each researcher represented a different discipline: quantum physics, computational theory, xenolinguistics, advanced mathematics, united by a singular vision. "We're not just building a communication network," Chen muttered to Dr. Arya Nakamura, his chief quantum architect. "We're creating a universal translation of possibility." The current prototype hummed with an energy that felt almost sentient. Quantum entanglement nodes created intricate patterns of connection that defied traditional understanding of information transfer. Where other species saw communication as a linear process, humans were designing a multidimensional conversation. Arya studied a complex holographic model rotating between them. Thousands of interconnected quantum nodes pulsed with potential, each representing a different approach to interstellar communication. "The Zorn think in binary," she observed. "We're designing something closer to a living ecosystem of information." Their current challenge was unprecedented. Traditional faster-than-light communication relied on fixed transmission protocols. The human approach was radically different: an adaptive network that could reshape itself in real time, learning and evolving with each transmission. A junior researcher named Miguel Rodriguez, no relation to Elena, but equally brilliant, approached with a fresh set of computational models. "Look at this," he said, bringing up a holographic display that showed how their quantum network could simultaneously transmit and receive multiple layers of information. The breakthrough wasn't just technological. It was philosophical. Most galactic species viewed communication as a transfer of information. Humans were designing a system that treated communication as a living, breathing interaction. Each transmission would carry not just data, but context, potential, and adaptive learning capabilities. Dr. Chen walked to a sealed chamber where the primary quantum core resided. Through layers of specialized quantum dampening glass, a small orb pulsed with an inner light that seemed to defy conventional physics. Quantum processors weren't just calculating, they were interpreting, predicting, reimagining. "We're creating a universal translator," Chen explained to a visiting government official. "But it's more than language. It's a way of understanding fundamentally different forms of intelligence." The quantum core represented years of research that had pushed the boundaries of human understanding. Each microsecond, it processed more potential communication scenarios than most species could conceive in a decade. Machine learning algorithms developed by the team could predict communication patterns across biological, technological, and even hypothetical alien communication systems. Arya brought up a simulation showing how their network could potentially decode communication from silicon-based life forms, electromagnetic entities, and even hypothetical consciousnesses that didn't rely on traditional biological structures. "The Zorn believe in fixed information channels," Miguel commented. "We're designing something closer to a living conversation." Outside the facility, the Atacama Desert stretched endlessly, a reminder of humanity's ability to thrive in seemingly impossible environments. Inside, a team of researchers was preparing to do the same with the fundamental concept of communication itself. Dr. Chen looked at the quantum core, a small smile playing on his lips. They weren't just building a communication network. They were creating a bridge between different forms of intelligence, a technology that could transform how species understood each other. The quantum core pulsed, as if in agreement. The neutral space station Concordia hung like a delicate crystal against the backdrop of a distant nebula. Its design reflected the complexity of galactic diplomacy. No single species could claim ownership, and its architecture merged elements from dozens of different cultural aesthetics. Dr. Elena Rodriguez arrived precisely 3 minutes before the scheduled meeting, her timing as calculated as everything else in her diplomatic approach. The station's internal systems recognized her clearance. guided her through a series of bioadaptive corridors that seemed to adjust to her very presence. The conference room was a masterpiece of diplomatic engineering. Holographic interfaces allowed for simultaneous translation, environmental adjustments for each species' unique physiological needs, and multi-dimensional communication protocols. Around the circular table sat representatives that most of the galaxy considered too insignificant to matter. The Krull merchants occupied the first section. Small, insectoid creatures with multiple compound eyes and intricate communication patterns that most species found incomprehensible. Their current economic status was little more than galactic middlemen, constantly pushed to the margins by larger, more aggressive powers. Beside them, the Varix traders sat in their liquid-based environmental suits. Once proud nomadic merchants, they had been systematically marginalized by the Zorn Imperium's expansionist policies. Their once vast trade networks had been reduced to a shadow of their former glory. The Lithians, silicon-based entities that appeared like living crystal formations, occupied the far side of the table. They had long been studied but rarely consulted, their unique form of intelligence typically viewed as too alien to be practically integrated into galactic society. Elena activated a holographic display that began to pulse with a living, breathing representation of potential futures. "We're not offering a traditional alliance," she began, her voice modulated to resonate with each species' unique auditory capabilities. "We're proposing a comprehensive transformation." The holographic display began to show intricate networks of potential economic partnerships. For the Krull merchants, it demonstrated trade routes that could restore their economic independence. The Varix traders saw pathways to rebuild their nomadic trading networks. The Lithians observed computational models that could integrate their unique form of intelligence into broader galactic systems. "The Zorn Imperium believes in control through limitation," Elena continued. "We believe in potential through collaboration." Each species leaned forward, their various physiological responses betraying intense interest. The Krell's compound eyes shifted in complex patterns. The Varix's liquid environment rippled with excitement. The Lithian crystalline structures began to refract light in increasingly complex ways. Elena's presentation wasn't just about immediate benefits. It was a comprehensive vision of societal transformation. She showed economic models, technological exchange programs, and cultural integration strategies that went far beyond traditional diplomatic approaches. "This isn't charity," she emphasized. "This is mutual evolution." The Krell representative, a veteran trader named Zixka, was the first to respond. His communication involved a complex series of chirps and body movements that the station's translation systems interpreted with remarkable precision. "You propose something no other species has considered," Zixka communicated. "Not conquest, not control, but genuine collaboration." The Varix Elder, a being who had witnessed centuries of galactic political maneuvering, studied the holographic projections with a level of scrutiny that suggested both hope and deep skepticism. "What prevents this from being another form of manipulation?" the Varix Elder asked. Elena smiled, a gesture that translated across species as a sign of genuine openness. "Transparency," she responded. "Complete, unfiltered access to our intentions, our technologies, our potential failures and successes." As the meeting continued, something extraordinary began to happen. These marginalized species weren't just hearing a proposal. They were witnessing the birth of a fundamentally different approach to galactic interaction. The conference room became more than a diplomatic space. It became a crucible of potential, where the forgotten could imagine themselves as architects of a new future. The Global Economic Strategic Center occupied a massive underground complex beneath the Swiss Alps. From the outside, it appeared to be nothing more than a research facility. Inside, it was the nerve center of humanity's most sophisticated economic warfare strategy. Dr. Aisha Okik stood before a wall of quantum computational interfaces, her fingers moving with the precision of a concert pianist. Each movement generated complex algorithmic patterns that would reshape entire economic systems. Behind her, a team of economists, mathematicians, data scientists, and strategic analysts worked in near-perfect synchronization. "We're not destroying their economy," Aisha muttered to her chief algorithmic strategist, Dr. Ravi Mehta. "We're revealing its fundamental weaknesses." The Zorn Imperium's economic structure was a marvel of centralized control. Massive trade networks, resource extraction systems, and strategic resource allocation had made them the dominant economic force in 3 galactic sectors. But they had a critical flaw: a rigidity that mistook control for strength. Ravi brought up a holographic display showing the Zorn's economic network. Thousands of trade routes, resource streams, and financial channels pulsed with intricate connections. "Their system is like a massive organism," he explained, "highly complex, but ultimately vulnerable to systemic disruption." Aisha's approach was surgical. Instead of direct economic attacks, she was designing a series of micro-interventions that would cause cascading economic recalibrations. Each algorithm was carefully crafted to exploit the smallest inefficiencies in the Zorn's economic model. A junior analyst named Sofia Rodriguez, no relation to Elena, but equally brilliant, approached with a new set of predictive models. "Look at this," she said, bringing up a visualization that showed how a single adjusted trade route could create exponential economic ripple effects. The team wasn't just working with traditional economic models. They were applying quantum computational techniques that could predict economic behaviors with unprecedented accuracy. Machine learning algorithms developed by the team could model potential economic scenarios faster than any known computational system in the galaxy. "The Zorn believe in absolute control," Aisha explained to a visiting government official. "We understand that true economic strength comes from adaptability." Their primary target wasn't destruction. It was transformation. Each micro-intervention was designed to create opportunities for the marginalized species they have been meeting with. A slight adjustment to a resource allocation algorithm could suddenly make a previously unprofitable trade route incredibly attractive. A minor recalibration of financial transfer protocols could open new economic possibilities for species long pushed to the margins. Ravi brought up a simulation showing how their economic strategies could potentially redistribute economic power without causing systemic collapse. "We're not breaking their system," he said. "We're helping it evolve." Outside the facility, the Swiss Alps stood as a testament to humanity's ability to thrive in challenging environments. Inside, a team of researchers was preparing to do the same with the fundamental concept of economic interaction. Dr. O'Keefe studied the complex holographic displays, a subtle smile playing on her lips. They were writing a new chapter of economic possibility, one algorithm at a time. The quantum computational cores hummed with potential, each microsecond processing more economic scenarios than most species could conceive in a decade. Humanity wasn't just challenging the Zorn Imperium's economic model. They were reimagining the very concept of economic interaction. A notification flashed across one of the displays. The first algorithmic intervention had been deployed. Somewhere in the vast expanse of space, the Zorn Imperium's economic strategists would soon realize that something fundamental was changing, and they wouldn't even see it coming. The Quantum Communication Transmission Center rose from the Pacific Ocean like a crystalline dream. Half submerged, half emerging, the facility represented the pinnacle of human architectural and technological innovation. Its design defied traditional engineering, adaptive materials that could withstand extreme oceanic conditions while maintaining perfect quantum communication capabilities. Dr. Lena Yamoto stood at the primary transmission hub, her fingers hovering over quantum entanglement interfaces that seemed to breathe with living information. Around her, a team of communication specialists, artists, scientists, and cultural experts prepared the most ambitious transmission in galactic history. "We're not sending a message," Lena explained to her team. "We're sending an experience." The transmission would target every communication channel accessible to the Zorn Imperium. But this was no typical informational broadcast. It was a comprehensive archive of human existence, a living, breathing representation of humanity's complexity. The first layer was musical. Composers had spent months creating compositions that could resonate across different sensory spectrums. A piece by Dr. Miguel Rodriguez combined quantum acoustic algorithms with traditional human musical forms. It could theoretically be experienced by silicon-based life forms, electromagnetic entities, and biological species with radically different auditory capabilities. Visual artists had created multidimensional representations that went beyond traditional image making. These were living art forms that could transform based on the receiver's perceptual capabilities. Holographic displays showed landscapes that shifted between mathematical precision and emotional abstraction. Scientific archives followed, not just raw data, but comprehensive narratives of human discovery. Each scientific breakthrough was presented as a story of curiosity, failure, adaptation, and ultimate understanding. The archives showed humanity's journey from primitive tool use to quantum computational theory, highlighting not just achievements, but the process of discovery itself. Philosophical compilations came next. Recordings of human debates, philosophical discussions, and cultural dialogues that demonstrated the species' capacity for complex, nuanced thinking. These weren't just arguments, but explorations of potential, conversations that showed how humanity approached understanding. A senior anthropological researcher named Dr. Sarah Chen approached Lena with a final set of cultural compilations. "We've included everything," she said, "from our greatest achievements to our most profound challenges." The transmission was designed to be more than information. It was an invitation to understanding. Quantum communication protocols ensured that the message could be received and interpreted across multiple sensory and cognitive spectrums. Translation matrices went beyond language, creating a comprehensive communication framework that could adapt to different forms of intelligence. "The Zorn see us as a potential threat," Lena said, reviewing the final transmission parameters. "We're showing them we're a potential conversation." Each transmission node pulsed with an energy that seemed almost alive. Quantum entanglement allowed for simultaneous transmission and reception, creating a communication method that was less about sending information and more about creating a shared experience. A junior researcher named Alex Rodriguez, catching the theme of brilliant humans with the same last name, brought up the final transmission parameters. "We're essentially offering them a window into our entire species," he observed. Lena smiled. "Not just a window. An invitation." As the transmission began, the entire facility seemed to vibrate with potential. Somewhere across the vast expanse of space, the Zorn Imperium's communication networks would begin to receive something unprecedented, a comprehensive, living representation of human existence. It wasn't an attack. It wasn't a threat. It was a conversation. The Psychological Dynamics Research Institute occupied a sprawling complex in the heart of New Zealand's most remote wilderness. From the outside, it appeared to be nothing more than an advanced ecological research facility. Inside, it was the most sophisticated center for understanding complex social systems in human history. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood before a massive holographic display that mapped the intricate psychological structures of the Zorn Imperium. Years of careful research, intercepted communications, cultural analysis, and advanced predictive modeling had revealed something extraordinary, a fundamental weakness in the Zorn's entire societal framework. "It's not about breaking their system," Elena explained to her lead psychological strategist, Dr. James Okoro. "It's about revealing the potential for transformation." The Zorn's hierarchical society was built on a complex algorithm of threat assessment and resource potential. Their entire social structure, political system, and economic model relied on a seemingly impenetrable logic of control and expansion. But human researchers had discovered something profound, a series of subtle psychological pressure points that could fundamentally reshape their entire worldview. James brought up a series of holographic models showing the Zorn's decision-making processes. Layers of computational analysis revealed intricate patterns of behavior, communication, and social interaction. "Their entire system is designed to minimize uncertainty," he observed. "But uncertainty is where true innovation happens." The team had spent years developing a comprehensive approach that went far beyond traditional psychological warfare. This was about creating a profound shift in perception, a way of showing the Zorn that their current path was fundamentally limiting their own potential. A junior researcher named Maria Rodriguez, continuing the trend of brilliant researchers with the same last name, approached with a new set of analytical models. "Look at this," she said, bringing up a visualization that showed how small informational interventions could create massive systemic changes. Their strategy wasn't about direct confrontation. It was about creating opportunities for internal reflection. The quantum communication transmissions from the previous phase had begun to work their magic. Zorn citizens were experiencing unprecedented access to human culture, scientific achievements, and philosophical thinking. Each transmission was carefully designed to create cognitive dissonance, to challenge the fundamental assumptions of their society. "We're not attacking their system," Elena explained to a visiting government official. "We're offering them a mirror that reflects their own unrealized potential." Psychological profiles were created with unprecedented depth. The research team understood that each transmission, each piece of information, needed to be precisely calibrated to create maximum impact with minimal direct intervention. Dr. Okoro brought up a simulation showing how their psychological strategies could potentially create systemic changes without causing societal collapse. "We're not breaking their system," he said. "We're helping it evolve." The holographic displays showed complex networks of potential psychological interventions. Each algorithm was designed to create moments of profound questioning, to introduce concepts that would challenge the Zorn's most fundamental beliefs about themselves and their place in the galaxy. Outside the facility, the New Zealand wilderness stood as a testament to complex ecological systems that thrived through adaptation. Inside, a team of researchers was preparing to do the same with an entire species' psychological framework. Dr. Rodriguez studied the complex holographic displays, a subtle smile playing on her lips. They were writing a new chapter of psychological possibility, one carefully crafted intervention at a time. The quantum computational cores hummed with potential, processing more psychological scenarios in a microsecond than most species could conceive in a decade. Humanity wasn't just challenging the Zorn Imperium's psychological model. They were reimagining the very concept of societal transformation. A notification flashed across one of the displays. The first psychological intervention had been deployed. Somewhere in the vast expanse of space, the Zorn Imperium's leadership would soon realize that something fundamental was changing, and they wouldn't even see it coming. The Galactic Concordance observation chamber hung in the delicate balance between neutrality and anticipation. Representatives from hundreds of species watched as something unprecedented began to unfold, the gradual deconstruction of the Zorn Imperium's seemingly unshakable power structure. It wasn't a catastrophic collapse. It was a metamorphosis. The first signs were subtle. Communication channels that had once been rigid and controlled began to show unexpected flexibility. Zorn citizens, previously confined to strict information protocols, started engaging with the comprehensive transmissions from Earth in ways no one had predicted. Dr. Elena Rodriguez observed the unfolding scenario from the Concordance's primary monitoring station. Beside her, diplomatic strategists from various species leaned forward, their various physiological responses betraying intense curiosity. "This isn't destruction," Elena explained to the Lithian representative. "This is evolution." The quantum communication networks developed by human researchers had created something extraordinary. Each transmission was a living, breathing ecosystem of information that adapted to its receivers. Where traditional communication saw information as a fixed entity, humans had designed a system that was fundamentally alive. Zorn border colonies were the first to show significant changes. These outer regions, long marginalized by the central imperial structure, began to develop unprecedented levels of independent communication. Trade routes that had been strictly controlled started to show signs of creative adaptation. A Varix trade analyst named Krell brought up a holographic display showing economic network transformations. "Their entire economic ecosystem is restructuring," he observed. but not through external pressure, through internal realization. The psychological interventions designed by human researchers were working with mathematical precision. Each carefully crafted transmission created moments of profound questioning. Zorn citizens began to see their own society through a lens of potential rather than limitation. Dr. James Okoro, monitoring the psychological dynamics, noticed something remarkable. The Zorn's hierarchical system, once an impenetrable fortress of control, was developing unexpected points of flexibility. Leadership structures that had been rigid for generations began to show signs of adaptive thinking. "We're not defeating them," Alina muttered to her team. "We're helping them discover themselves." The Galactic Concordance watched in growing amazement. This wasn't a traditional diplomatic strategy. This was a fundamental reimagining of interspecies interaction. Marginal species that had long been oppressed by the Zorn Imperium began to find new opportunities. The economic algorithms developed by human strategists had created pathways for previously marginalized groups to participate in galactic economic systems. A notification flickered across the primary display. The Zorn's central communication networks were experiencing unprecedented levels of internal dialogue. Where once there had been absolute conformity, now there were conversations. The human approach had transformed the very concept of conflict. Diplomatic channels that had been frozen for generations suddenly burst open. Former subject species began to see the Zorn not as oppressors, but as potential partners in a more complex galactic ecosystem. Dr. Rodriguez studied the holographic displays, each pulse of information revealing layers of transformation. Humanity hadn't conquered the Zorn Imperium. They had offered them a path to understanding. Outside the observation chamber, the vast expanse of space seemed to pulse with potential. Something fundamental was changing, not through destruction, but through the most powerful force in the universe, understanding. A senior Concordance diplomat turned to Alina, a mixture of amazement and respect in his voice. "You didn't just change a species," he said. "You showed them how to change themselves." Alina simply smiled. The most profound revolutions, after all, always come from within. The diplomatic chamber of the Galactic Concordance was unlike any meeting space in known history. Its architecture seemed to breathe with possibility. Adaptive surfaces that could modify environmental conditions for any species, translation matrices that went beyond language to capture nuance and intent. Dr. Elena Rodriguez arrived precisely at the designated time, accompanied by a diverse team of human diplomats, scientists, and cultural experts. The Zorn delegation waited, their once rigid postures now marked by an unprecedented sense of uncertainty and potential. High Counselor Zarvex, leader of the Zorn Imperium, was the first to speak. His translator conveyed words that carried the weight of a civilization in transformation. "We request a comprehensive dialogue," he began, "not as conquerors, not as conquered, but as potential partners." The irony was not lost on Alina. The species that had once viewed humanity as a potential threat now sought understanding. Behind the diplomatic facade, years of careful strategy had culminated in this moment. The economic algorithms, psychological interventions, and quantum communication networks had done their work with surgical precision. The Zorn weren't defeated. They were awakening. Dr. James Okoro brought up a holographic display showing the comprehensive transformation they have facilitated. It wasn't a story of conquest, but of potential. Each visualization demonstrated how their approach had created pathways for systemic evolution. "We're not here to dictate," Alina explained, her words carefully chosen. "We're here to explore possibilities." The treaty being negotiated was unlike any in galactic history. It wasn't about territory or resources. It was a comprehensive framework for mutual understanding, technological exchange, and collective growth. The Varix trade representatives had been instrumental in facilitating these negotiations. Their long marginalized species now found themselves as critical intermediaries, their extensive trading networks becoming bridges of communication and opportunity. A representative from the Lithian delegation, silicon-based entities known for their hyperlogical approach, brought up a complex computational model. Your approach defies traditional diplomatic methodology, the Lithian representative observed. You have transformed conflict into an opportunity for collective evolution. Elena smiled. Conflict is often just a failure of imagination, she responded. The treaty's core principles were radical in their simplicity. Open communication networks, comprehensive cultural exchange programs, collaborative scientific research, economic pathways that prioritized mutual growth over individual dominance. Dr. Ravi Mehta, the economic strategist, presented models showing how this approach could create unprecedented galactic stability. Economic systems that had been rigid for generations would now have the flexibility to adapt, grow, and transform. Outside the diplomatic chamber, representatives from dozens of species watched the proceedings. What was happening wasn't just a negotiation between two civilizations. It was a reimagining of galactic interaction itself. The quantum communication networks developed by human researchers continued to pulse with potential. Each transmission was a living demonstration of humanity's approach. Complex, adaptive, always seeking understanding. High Counselor Zarvex studied the comprehensive treaty. Where once there would have been a demand for absolute control, now there was curiosity. Where there had been fear, now there was potential. We are not surrendering, Zarvex stated, his translator capturing the nuanced mixture of humility and strength. We are transforming. Elena nodded. This was never about defeating the Zorn. It was about helping them discover their own potential. As the final clauses of the treaty were discussed, something extraordinary became clear. Humanity hadn't conquered a civilization. They had offered a pathway to understanding. The vast expanse of space seemed to vibrate with possibility. A new chapter in galactic interaction was beginning, not with the clash of powerful forces, but with the quiet power of comprehension. A single transmission continued to pulse through quantum communication networks, an invitation to conversation, to growth, to something greater than any single species could imagine alone.